Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. And today I'm reviewing Great Western Trail from a bunch of companies. Great Western Trail, which is actually now in its second edition. The second edition does come with a few small changes. Most notably, there is a solo mode, few small adjustments, some thematic changes as far as the Indians versus Cowboys and things like that. But for the most part, this review is equally applicable to both games, to first and second edition, regardless of which of the many publishers are currently touching the game. In any case, Great Western Trail, designed by Alexander Pfister. Great Western Trail is a 14 keyword game. It's a tableau building, deck building, rondel, action selection, a whole bunch of things going on in this game. A bunch of mechanics mixed and merged together in this strong medium weight Euro game, medium to heavyweight Euro game. Great Western Trail is going to have you wandering around a rondel, wandering around this path over here. And for the record, before we dive into this too heavily, not a rules overview, not by a long shot. This is going to be lightly touching upon how you play the game. There's a lot of things going on. I'm going to miss a lot. Please do not rely on this for any form of guidance on how to play the game. But with that said, general idea is you're going to be taking your cowboy on a little bit of a rondel around this path. You're going to be moving along the pathways, trying to figure out which spots to land on as you make your way to the end of the trail, at which point you're going to cash in your hand of cattle. You're going to have a hand of cattle. Let's go ahead and drop a hand. You're going to have a hand of cattle, and you're going to take a look at this, and you're going to combine the total values of all the different cattles, at which point you will go ahead and put down a token on one of the things that line up that number. So for example, I can't count this gray because I already have a gray, so I have a total value of black, white, and gray, total value of 5, which means I can put down a token from my board onto one of these spots at 4 or below. And you cannot place a token on a spot you already have, except for Kansas City, which is bad for you. You lose 6 points for every token in Kansas City. The goal of the game is you're trying to figure out the way to most efficiently build up your engine in a variety of different ways, including advancing your actual engine. There's an actual little train engine over there. But you're trying to figure out your pathway to victory in this game. You see, on your turn, you're going to move 1, 2, or 3 spots, although you have to take into account various things that will block you, such as buildings. As the game progresses, more and more buildings will be put on this board. Players will have their own unique buildings that will be flipped before the game begins, so you're all going to be working with the same buildings, but the actual buildings you have will vary depending on which sides of these tiles you're utilizing. You're going to be placing buildings on this board, which will slow down the pathway, but there's also ways for you to level up how fast your cowboy moves, starting off with 3, but potentially another 2 and another 1 for a total movement value of 6. That's relevant since on your first turn, for example, you can go ahead and say, I'm going to go 1, 2, 3 and start off over there, which is a very quick jump. You can see over there, 1, 2, 3, and then 1. All it takes is 3 turns. If you want to rush to that end over there, all it takes is 3 movements across the board, taking the actions at the locations you stop at, but a very quick moving rondel as far as getting to the end. That rondel is going to slow down quickly. Between the houses that are added to the track, between the buildings that are added, and between the fact that you don't always want to move 3, very often you want to go to specific buildings to weed your hand as you go through the experience. That's going to be an important part of what you do and how you do it. Because the main goal of getting to the end is putting out more stations, putting out more of those tokens, and that means you're going to want to have the right hand of cards, which means there's going to be a bunch of things you're trying to take into account. There's going to be taking into account the fact that you want to discard cards as you move, and different options, different cards will give you different abilities to discard for different reasons. Over here you can discard a black card for 2 money, and then you can also buy a cattle from the cattle market. This is where you'll have additional colors of cards that you don't otherwise have access to, and getting those into your deck will really help you start to have more of a distribution of other colors in your deck. Over here you can discard 2 cards of the same value, same color, in order to go ahead and get 4 money. Additionally, you can take a hazard off the board for 7 money, which will be useful for many of the endgame bonus cards that reward you for having certain cards, certain tokens, and certain hazards in the game, and will give you points if you accomplish them. And so you're trying to go through these tiles, weeding your hand, not really weeding your hand, discarding the right cards so you can draw up to have better cards. If I go ahead and discard this one over here, and then maybe I draw a green, nope, but if I discard that in the next spot, and then maybe draw a green, eventually I'll draw a green, eventually there's a green somewhere here. Here we go. Suddenly, I have a hand value of 7, which allows me to go to Colorado Springs, which otherwise I couldn't get to. So that idea of trying to discard the right cards to draw up, and again, many of these tiles will give you different ways to discard different colors. You have ways of discarding a white card, you have ways of discarding a green card, the black, the double grays over there. Different options as far as what you can do, and then a variety of the tiles will let you do other things as well. Like I said already, you have the opportunity to buy cattle over here. And these are the preset buildings. You'll randomize where they go. There is a starting setup for the first time you play. Past that, there's going to be ways to move your engine across the board, moving your engine further and further, where you'll have the opportunity to put down tokens in these spots as you go across the board. You also have the option over here as far as putting out your buildings. This tile lets you place buildings down the board at a discount based on the types of workers you have, because you're also going to have the opportunity to buy workers. When you discard a white card here, you can also buy up to 2 workers, paying from the market over here, and these workers will reward you different ways. We can have options to build buildings more efficiently, to buy cattle more efficiently, and to move your train more efficiently around the board. A bunch of different discounts and things to be mindful of as far as how you're trying to build up your engine in Tableau. And speaking of building up your engine in Tableau, you're also going to have your personal player board over here. Your personal player board, which you'll be removing tiles from as you go. You'll be removing these tokens to upgrade what you can do. Anything from, like I said already, upgrading your movement. Although this is a black bordered spot, which means you can only use those on black bordered spots over here, as opposed to the white bordered spots where you can put anything else. So meaning the black bordered spots can take a white or a black disc. White bordered spots can only take a white disc. So you're going to start by leveling up a lot of these basic tiles over here. These are your auxiliary actions, where you can go on certain spots that will give you single or double auxiliary actions. So for example, over here, this is a double auxiliary action. You can look at one of your actions over here. For example, let's say we upgraded this and put that down over there. This one allows us to draw 2 cards and discard 2 cards, letting us get a better hand. Because of the fact that it's a double over there. Alternatively, whenever you go to a tile, if you can't use it, you can also just go ahead and cash in for a single auxiliary action. And these auxiliary actions will give you different ways of building up your development of the game, either getting better cards, getting more income, moving your station, moving your train further or lesser along the board. You have opportunities to increase your hand size over here, to get more certificates, and to move further on the board, all while you gather employees, putting them into the center row over here, and getting the bonuses as you go through it. Again, this is a deck building Tableau Rondel game with a whole bunch of things to be mindful of as you go through it. That is the high level overview of Great Western Trail. There's a lot of things I didn't touch upon. You're going to have all your own buildings. I briefly touched upon that. The buildings are all going to have different abilities as far as what you can do, different things that you can add, different abilities as far as any number of things. For over here, you're going to get, 2 money. When you land in that building, you're going to get 2 money for every single one of your buildings built on trees. If you manage to get a bunch of buildings built on tree spots, that'll really help you get a chunk of extra money in the game. You're going to have a way of going ahead and discarding, similar to the discarding a black card for 2 money, you can discard a white card for 4 money and still buy a cattle, giving you more opportunities to buy cattle, potentially getting you more money for your 2 cards, for your white cards you're discarding. You can have all these different options as far as the buildings that you're building. Here you can discard a yellow for 10 money. That's huge. If you manage to get a few yellows in your deck, getting 10 money in a game that can often be very cash strapped for money, that can be absolutely huge in the game. But also, more importantly, these buildings give you important rest stops in the game, because of the fact that as the board develops, players are going to get in your way, and other players' buildings can very much get in your way and not really help you and just be a barrier and a blockade for you. And so having these buildings down the board gives you your own important rest stops that work into your own strategy while limiting and blocking other players, which makes them an incredibly important part of the game. But with that all out of the way, let's go ahead, and again, light rules overview, let's go ahead and dive into the ease of play, starting off with the ease of play. Ease of play on the game. Overall, this game is fairly accessible given the game weight. That's a big caveat over there. There's a lot going on in the rulebook. Rulebook is, and again, this is the first edition rulebook. I have not read the second edition rulebook, so I can't comment on that. First edition rulebook is very section heavy. I mean, this is what it tends to look like. Lots of stuff over there, but each section is fairly clearly explained. I would say I have no real questions on how to play the game for me in the rulebook. There's just a lot of information because there's a lot of stuff going on in the game. So for the game weight, it's not that hard to understand, but it is a lot to pick up, and more importantly, there's just a ton of little small side things on all over the various things. Even the details as far as, the black tiles versus the white tiles, while that makes sense once you start playing the game, it's another thing that's kind of just mentally in the back of your head and hoping you kind of understand it as you go through it. And then these rules of all the stations, how you upgrade the stations, how you skip past other players' trains. There's all these small little things to be mindful of in the game. None of them are in a problem in and of itself. It just all adds up very quickly. Game length comes in at roughly 2 hours. It can vary, especially if you're playing with higher player counts with more players. Speaking of player count, like I said already, the new version of this game is a 1 to 4 player game. I believe the original is a 2 to 4 player game, no solo mode. And as far as what I like, don't like, and can see others not liking, starting off with what I like, which is the variable buildings offhand. The buildings are one of the main reasons I have to dive into Great Western Trail again and again. The buildings and the variety of the buildings and the pursuit of your own strategy that you can customize around those buildings is a lot of fun. Both the aspect of blocking your opponents, as well as the aspect of giving yourself those rest spots, as well as the aspects of diving into your own strategy. One of my favorite buildings I don't know if I have it over here on the side, because it depends on the side you're on. One of my favorite buildings is the one in which you get to basically take the action of the building and then immediately hopscotch to the next building, which can be incredibly useful whether you're pointing at a gray building, a default starter neutral building, or whether you're pointing at another one of your own. It can be a lot of fun to get that double 1-2 punch over on the buildings, as well as the additional progression forward on the path. All the buildings will tie into your strategies in different ways, giving you different ways that you can try to move forward in the game. This yellow building seems a lot of fun. The problem with the yellow building is if you have the yellow building, everyone does, because while the buildings are randomized, you randomize a single person's buildings, and then everyone else copies it, which means if you get this building in play, you better start going to that cattle market quickly and grabbing those yellow cattle, because you can bet everyone else will too, and whoever has the most access to those yellow cattle will have the most opportunity to take advantage of that building. There's a lot going on as far as the way the game will totally change depending on the building market you have and the strategies you can pursue because of that building market. The variable buildings are a huge part of it. As far as juggling the moving rondel, that plays into the whole building aspect. This rondel starts off as something that you can wander through incredibly quickly. You can go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, getting to the end goal as fast as you want, which isn't necessarily a good thing. The problem is if you get to the end faster than you're building up and developing your deck and your ability to toy with that deck, then you're going to quickly find yourself placing extra tokens in Kansas City, which is going to cause you to get some money but lose a whole bunch of points, which is not great for your strategy because you kind of don't want to lose points in this game, and most games for that matter, except for golf. I guess in golf you want to lose points. But the rondel is going to develop and change and iterate, and your desire to progress along that rondel is going to change and iterate. And as far as you building out your jump points with those buildings, that's going to be a big part of how you try to juggle those aspects of the game. As far as which employees you're going for, how you're going to build up your tableau over there, and your general, the whole upgrading of your player board. This whole Tableau thing going on, and how you choose to pursue your strategy, whether you're focusing more on hand management, on money, on movement, which of the various employee pathways you're working on. Do you want quick and cheap access to cattle? Get a bunch of the cattle ranchers, whatever you call them, over here. Do you want your train moving faster? Do you want your buildings cheaper? There's a ton of different options as far as what you're trying to do, how you're trying to pursue it. There's a lot of pathways to victory in this game, depending on how you upgrade, what you buy, what you build, how much you focus on deck building, how much you focus on other abilities, how much you grab the various objective cards. We haven't really talked about the objective cards over here. Briefly mentioned them, but these will both go into your deck, as well as give you points in the game for accomplishing them, which can make them be a lot of fun as far as how you try to, again, pursue your strategy. What are you trying to do in Great Western Trail as far as, well, winning? Do you focus on trying to clear the board of hazards? Many of these hazards will give you points as you get them, which is going to help you in and of itself, while also potentially clearing up the pathway. Over the course of the game, as you go to Kansas City every single time, you're going to be placing more and more of these tokens out, slowly clogging up the pathways, which means these side pathways might be a quicker way to skip a bunch of players' buildings that they got on your way, but only if the hazards are clear. And if you clear them while getting points, that'll both enable you to skip other players' buildings while also getting the points for those hazards. Again, a lot of pathways to victory in Great Western Trail. What I don't like in this game is really just two things. The first is that a lot of the stops in the game can feel tedious and small in scale for the purpose of the deck building. Meaning a lot of the early game buildings, and even your own buildings as you go through them, a lot of the buildings are basically, hey, I have a hand of cards that isn't ideally suited to actually get to Kansas City. I have a bunch of these lame cattle, these black, these Jersey, these Dutch belt over here. All these starting cattle are just not that great, and especially once you start adding cattle to your deck, the game's about clearing these cattle out of your hand. Which means a lot of the stops in the game are basically like, hey, I'm going to go to this spot to discard a card, get 2 money, do a thing. I'm going to go to this spot, discard a card, get 2 money, do a thing. A lot of the spots in the game, a lot of the sequencing of the rondel feels like a tedious way to clear out your deck so you can get the ideal deck in Kansas City, which is the point. Many of you are sitting there saying, well, that's the point. And I agree that's the point. But the way it executes is charming at first, but gets old fairly quickly in a game that runs for 2 hours. I like many of the spots in the game as far as the fun things you can do in them, but sometimes it feels like you're stopping somewhere not because you want to do something, but because you have to do something, and I don't like that feeling quite as much. It means a big part of Great Western Trail for me feels like grunt work as opposed to, hey, look at this enjoyable way I'm building up my engine. And speaking of which, and secondly, the deck building is something I'm not actually a fan of in this game, and I generally love deck building. But I find that as much as I like the overall puzzle of Great Western Trail, I find the deck building is almost a chore. Same basic idea. I don't feel like I'm building out a cool deck as far as look how cool this deck is as far as the abilities and the actions, and that's not the style of game it is. But while this game does have deck building, the deck building is more about trying to come up with the optimal deck for the end game for hitting Kansas City, and so a lot of it feels like deck cleaning, the entire process, not deck weeding, not the trashing cards from your deck, but just getting to a point in the game where you can actually have the ideal hand of cards. It feels like you're working your way towards that point. And again, many of you are like, that is the point of the game. I agree that's the point of the game. It just means that I don't like deck building in this game, and I don't like the process of getting to that ideal hand. It just feels more like a chore than something I particularly aspire to. As far as I can see others not liking, first of all, those hazards can be incredibly frustrating. The slowdown of the game can be frustrating. Having players put a bunch of buildings in your spot and potentially having dead pathways, those are frustrating moments in the game. And then secondly, I'd say that the game has a lot going on. This is a game where there's a lot of small little things. The core concept, the core gameplay loop, I can probably teach you in around 7 to 10 minutes. But if I actually want you to understand everything going on in the game, that's a half-hour teach easy to make sure you actually understand. Like if you go on YouTube, for example, you can find like an 8-minute video from Becca Scott, great video that covers the high-level overview of what's going on in Great Western Trail. You can also find an hour and 20-minute long video that covers how you actually play the game. Both of those genuinely exist for a reason. This is a game with a lot of small, tedious stuff, and it's going to be a lot to actually make sure you understand everything and understand exactly what's going on in this game. There's a lot here. Just understand that before you dive into it. As far as final thoughts on Great Western Trail, despite my aspects of what I don't like about the game, overall there's more that I like here than what I don't. I enjoy this game. This game is a lot of fun. It's just the game that I would say, because of the complaints I have, I do find myself favoring some of my other Euros in my collection over this. This is a great game. It's a great game with a lot going on. It's a great game with a lot of strategy. It's a great game with a lot of pathways to victory. And some of the things it does ridiculously well. I just don't love the deck building or the tedious stops, but I do find myself constantly compelled to keep replaying it to try different strategies with those buildings. I really enjoy it while just wanting to drop more from it. I have not tried the expansion. Grey Whales, great something to the north, whatever it is. I haven't tried the expansion. Perhaps I should. I don't know if that would change exactly where I lie with this one. Overall, for me, this is a 4 out of 5. I really like it. I really enjoy it. It just happens to be that once you're focusing on games at this player count, at this game weight, I also like other games more, and I find myself drifting towards those as much as I do enjoy Great Western Trail. Speaking of which, as far as other game recommendations, if you're looking for something that is also train-themed, although a little different, Russian Railroads. Russian Railroads is a game that's going to be, well, a lot less luck on the deck building aspect. In fact, basically no luck at all. But Russian Railroads is a phenomenally well done, very, very tight game that I believe just got a reprint. And the second of all, if you're looking for something with almost a Rondel mechanism, not really a Rondel, but a looping process as you go through the game again and again, and trying to focus on your engine there, Le Havre is one of my favorite Euros of all time. From Uwe Rosenberg, a game I thoroughly enjoy and highly recommend. In any case, and until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. Hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, I hope you have a good one.